One of the things I wanted to do was to take some time at the end of the meeting here today just to talk a little bit about the foundation and what we do, and really to share with you some really exciting progress that's been made recently. And this is some research that has been sort of highlighted a little bit earlier today, and it's all going to be very consistent with some of the work done here at Stanford, but I did just want to take a couple of minutes to say a little bit more about that. So the Caring for Carcinoid Foundation, our name, as Jordan mentioned earlier, is a little bit unfortunate, but we are dedicated to discovering cures and treatments for patients with neuroendocrine tumors. And of course, that includes patients with both carcinoid tumors, if they're called that, or low-grade neuroendocrine tumors and pancreatic neuroendocrine tumors, and then of course all other related tumors like lung carcinoids and things like that. We were founded in 2005, actually by a metastatic carcinoid cancer patient, and really because, like so many of you, she went to her doctor and was told that there weren't any treatments for her, and that it was unlikely that there would be any treatments for her in the next couple of years. And she was living in Boston and said, "This is crazy. Harvard is down the street. MIT is down the street. There's nothing, and there's no researchers working on this." So really to address both the lack of options for her and the lack of research being done, that's where the Caring for Carcinoid Foundation came from. And Nancy also really saw firsthand what her diagnosis did to her family, and she wanted to make sure that that wouldn't happen to other families. And so one of our, I would say our main initiatives is to make sure that patients feel supported. And we try to do that through educational resources, and certainly a very big focus of that is educational events like the one here today. So I think I've probably said this before. We've been around for about 6 years, and in that time we funded about $6 million in research. We're of course very proud of that, and all of this research has been funded primarily by individual donations, corporate grants, and athletic events like the one last night. And I think a lot of people don't realize this, but I think people think research and they say, oh, federal government, we fund a lot of research, or pharmaceutical companies, they fund a lot of research. But what a lot of people don't realize is that for rare diseases like neuroendocrine tumors, there hasn't historically been a lot of support from those funders. So it really does take foundations like the Caring for Carcinoid Foundation and other really disease-focused advocates to try to advance progress. And I think this isn't just true for these cancers, it's true for the many, many rare diseases out there. And so, one of the things I think about our research strategy that is really special, it is very structured. And we have a research roadmap that was developed about 5 years ago by our very esteemed board of scientific advisors. Of course, that includes Dr. Fisher. And we try to fund research as quickly as possible, and we do that by funding research into basic science, which is trying to understand the cells and the pathways and all the stuff that's going on in your body to give way to the neuroendocrine tumors. We also focus on translational science, and this is really what the name says, which is trying to translate something in the laboratory into something in a patient. And as Dr. Fisher mentioned earlier, a really key initiative here is to try to create models that researchers can use. If a researcher had a mice, or they had a little petri dish of cells, they could then really easily start testing more new therapies and do it a lot quicker, but we just don't have those research tools that exist for many other cancers. Of course, in this category would also be things like the neuroendocrine tumor patient Tumor and Clinical Information Registry, of which Stanford is one of the participants. And again, a huge thank you to the many patients in this audience that are enabling us to proceed forward with that study. And then finally, we fund genomics research because we really believe this is going to be the quickest way to bring about personalized medicine for patients. And what genomics is trying to do is they try to look at your cancer cells, and they try to look at other cells in your body and say, what are the differences here? What are the mutations or the changes in the cancer cells that aren't in the other cells in the body? So then if we can come up with a medication that targets only those changes, you would have a therapy that would, in theory, kill the cancer, and it wouldn't produce any unwanted side effects. So that's primarily why us and institutions and a lot of other people are so interested in genomics research, is because it holds that promise of a treatment without those side effects like a chemotherapy would have. And so, I think one of our most exciting results, which was just announced earlier this year, was that some of our funded researchers have actually uncovered a set of mutations among patients with specific types of neuroendocrine tumors, particularly with patients with pancreatic neuroendocrine tumors. And I believe there was a poster out there earlier. I think these results have been replicated and are consistent with results that were done on a research project here at Stanford. And so what the scientists have actually found is they found mutations in mTOR pathway genes. So the mTOR pathway is the pathway that drugs like everolimus, which you've heard Dr. Kuhn speak about earlier today, and other mTOR inhibiting drugs act on. And what's really exciting about this is that you think if there's a correlation between having a mutation and a response to the therapy, that could be a way of prioritizing patients for treatment with these therapies. This is not yet proven, but it could be the next step in turning this into a personalized therapy for patients. So they also found mutations in 2 genes. They're called DAX and ATRX, and the names really, they don't matter. But what does matter is that these are genes that haven't before been associated with cancer. So there may have been people studying these genes, but they weren't trying to see if they had a role in causing cancer. So of course, this is a whole new area that people can start thinking of to target to try to treat cancers. And then they also found that in cells with these mutations, so this might be too technical, but normally there's research that suggests that in each of our cells we have DNA, and that DNA is protected by things at the end that are called telomeres. And there's a little bit of research that suggests that as you get older, your cells' telomeres will shorten, and this might be what causes cells to age and eventually die. And so what the researchers found is that in these cells with these mutations, the telomeres were actually getting longer. And so this could be protecting those cells from death. So it could be a little fountain of youth that these cancer cells have. So again, that's just a completely new idea to try to think about to try to attack these cancers. And so, we're really very proud of this research. It only really is directly applicable to a subset of patients, but it just highlights what progress really can be achieved through focused scientific research and trying to really get at the root of the problem. And it's our hope that we'll have other studies to both replicate these findings and to find similar sets of mutations among many more subtypes of these cancers. And so, outside of genomics research, we have a lot of other research. It's very promising that I'd be happy to talk about. It's all described in your booklet very briefly. Please feel free to give me a call if you're ever interested in it. I do want to discuss just quickly 2 other projects. So earlier today, we had a question about viral therapy and the use of viruses to treat cancer. So what's really exciting is there's another researcher, Johns Hopkins, and he's studying a virus that we don't really know why, but for whatever reason, it tends to infect and kill neuroendocrine tumor cells, but it's not able to infect and kill other cells. And so what's particularly exciting about this virus is it seems to be the most effective in patients with the most aggressive cancers. So if this research bears fruit, it could develop into a clinical trial and perhaps a treatment option for patients with the most aggressive types of neuroendocrine tumors. And then finally, to address that really critical need that researchers have for model systems to test new drugs, we're funding a researcher in the UK with a lot of experience in making mice with pancreatic cancer and hoping he can take those skills and translate them to neuroendocrine tumors. So I'd just like to really close by saying that, I joined the foundation in 2000 and a long time ago. I joined about 5 years ago, whatever year that was. And I joined really because I was a little bit of a science nerd. I wanted to make a difference. I was really turned off by the banking industry, and I was really inspired by what Nancy was trying to do and by her really aggressive approach to funding research, and of course by the many talented people she had assembled. And some of you know this, just last year my 29-year-old cousin was diagnosed with carcinoid, and it's just been incredible to see really sort of the devastation, the suffering, and the uncertainty that these diseases really can bring. And so, I join all of you in this room in really hopeful anticipation of the day when we have better treatments. So I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to me and to come to today's event. Thank you.